for May 21st, 2020. My name's Brett Prevedel, and I'm the chair of the Regional Advisory Council. And I'd like to take a moment to call a roll and have each member state what their role, who they represent on the council. Dan Abeda.
Sorry about that. Yeah, hi, this is Dan Abeda. I represent the Ashley National Forest.
Thank you. Richie Anderson. Is Richie present? He's not. Okay. Joe Arnold.
Yes, Joe Arnold. I represent the public.
Jamie Aree. Dick Bess.
Yes, I'm Dick Bess, and I represent agriculture.
Thank you. Daniel Davis. Natasha Haddon.
Yep, I'm here.
Who do you represent?
Oh, I represent BLM.
Thank you. Rebecca Jones.
I'm Rebecca Jones, and I represent non-consumptive users.
Mike Smith.
I represent the non-consumptive users as well.
Jeff Taniguchi. I know Jeff is here. We'll give him a second to figure out his mute button. While Jeff's doing that, I got it. Got it? Okay, go ahead.
Jeff Taniguchi, sportsman.
Thank you. And I don't believe Randy Durth from the Wildlife Board is present tonight. Is that correct?
Yeah, Brett, this is Dan. I talked to Randy yesterday, and he asked to be excused from this meeting.
Okay. I'm not sure if the other members are going to join as the meeting goes or not, but we will introduce them as they join. So with that, I'd also like to recognize the DWR personnel that are present. Could you please speak your name and state your position?
This is Miles Sandberg, the Regional Supervisor for DWR here in the Northeast region.
This is Dax Mangus. I'm the Wildlife Program Manager for DWR here in Northeastern region.
Hi, this is Tanya Kiefer-Selby. I'm the Outreach Manager for the Vernal office.
This is Randall Thacker. I'm the Assistant Wildlife Manager and Wildlife Biologist for the South Slope of the Uintas.
This is Blair Stringham. I'm the Migratory Game Bird Program Coordinator.
Bruce Johnson, AIS Field Operations Lieutenant.
Heather Talley, Upland Game Coordinator.
Bryan Christensen, Walk-in Access and Dedicated Hunter Program.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else live on the meeting that would like to introduce themselves? Okay, with that, we'll proceed into the agenda. You've reviewed the agenda, and as usual on all items, I will call a roll call of those present, and please state yes or no when I call your name. We need an approval on the agenda. If someone would make that motion.
Yeah, this is Dan Abeda, and I will make a motion that we approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve the agenda. Do we have a second?
This is Natasha Haddon, and I'll second that motion.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with the roll call. Again, just state yes or no. Dan Abeda?
Yes.
Yes.
Joe Arnold?
Yes.
Dick Smith?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Rebecca Jones?
Yes.
Mike Smith?
Yes.
And Jeff Taniguchi?
Yes.
Thank you. We now need to address last meeting's minutes. Are there any comments from the RAC or suggested changes from the minutes from our last meeting? Okay, if everybody's good with that, then I would accept a motion to accept the minutes from the April RAC meeting.
This
I'll
is
second
Natasha Haddon. I'll make a motion to accept the RAC meeting minutes from April.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
That was Jeff Taniguchi that seconded that. We'll now proceed with the roll call. Dan Abeda?
Okay, yes. Sorry. So what are we doing? I thought we were, yes, I approve that.
This is the minutes?
I concur, yes.
Yes, okay. Joe Arnold?
Let's see. Yes.
Dick Bess?
Yes.
Natasha Haddon?
Yes.
Rebecca Jones?
Yes.
Mike Smith?
Yes.
Jeff Taniguchi?
Yes.
Thank you. Has anyone else joined from the RAC since we started? I don't believe I see any on the screen. So we will proceed into the agenda. I will give a brief update from the Wildlife Board. As you remember, our last meeting, we didn't have a lot of division, and we sent everything up there with strong majority. And not a whole lot changed at the Wildlife Board, though they did adjust some numbers on some permits. They decreased the cash unit by an additional 800 permits, for a total decrease of 1,600 from last year's 2019 numbers. They reduced the desert bighorn sheep permits on the west to Parowitz to 12 permits, which was the same as 2019. They added the extra bison permit on the Henry Mountains to take care of the issue with the bonus points. So there would be one go to bonus points and one be to the random draw. They decreased some deer tags on San Juan Abajo buck deer unit by 150 tags to bring the decrease to 650, which was 150 more than was recommended. There was a recommended increase on bull elk permits on the Central Mountains, and they voted to keep that number the same as it was last year, which is 47 tags. They reduced the buck deer tags on the LaSalle and the LaSalle Mountains by an additional 100 permits, bringing the total reduction to 1,300. The remainder of the bucks, bulls, and once in a lifetime was passed as presented. On the antlerless tags, Randy Dirth made a motion to reduce the Book Cliffs cow tags that we discussed quite a bit to a total of 150. So that was, if I'm not wrong, that was a reduction of either 25 or 50 from what we recommended. And then the remainder of the antlerless recommendations were approved as presented. The CWMU rule amendments went through without not much controversy or discussion, or were approved. And all the CWMU antlerless permit numbers were approved as presented. The management bison hunt on the 9 Mile Range Creek was approved as presented. And then the only other things were there were some modifications to the rule on the cougar and bear amendments, and it was approved. And I believe it was fairly straightforward, and that's a summary on the wildlife board. I'll pass it on to Miles for an update on the region.
Okay, thanks, Brett. I'll give a quick update for the region. Like we mentioned in previous meetings, we've been working on this Bookcliff working group action plan. We have finalized that action plan at this time. So it has a number of strategies that the group has decided or agreed to try to address. And actually, there's a number of things that the group has made progress already on in this calendar year. So we're excited to have that plan in place and look to hopefully get some things turning around Bookcliff to help out our deer and elk populations out there. So we're excited about that, and we'll try to keep the RAC updated as time moves along and more projects are completed. Wanted to mention that during this COVID-19 epidemic, fishing licenses have skyrocketed, the sales for those. And just one statistic to maybe point out is, in youth 17 years or younger, we've had a 71% increase of license sales during COVID-19. So all across the board, it's fishing licenses are up, except for non-residents, but resident increases have more than made up for that. So people are really excited to get outdoors and enjoy some fresh air during this time. So it's pretty neat. Our habitat section, they're busy working on finalizing a number of habitat project proposals and working through funding meetings for those projects. If anybody from the RAC is interested, you can go on to the Watershed Restoration Initiative webpage. It's wri.utah.gov, and you can do a search for the Northeast region and take a look at some of the projects that are being proposed. You can look at historic projects as well. So we're excited to get another batch of projects lined up to begin working at our new fiscal year, which will be July 1. Our habitat crew, they finished rebuilding 3 pronghorn guzzlers out on the anthro unit. These are lower elevations of that unit to help those pronghorn out. A number of those old guzzlers were built, in the 80s, of now lived out their life, and so our habitat folks are out there busy taking care of some of those. But also mentioned that next week our habitat crew will be flying materials and guzzler tanks into the Dry Fork and Mosby Mountain areas northwest of Vernal. This is a project that's in cooperation with the Forest Service. So some good projects going on this year, and hopefully a lot more coming this fall. In our outreach section, just want to remind folks that, as they've found out that they've been successful for the dedicated hunter program, to really start to look at getting their projects and their hours done sooner than later. At that last minute crunch before the hunts, it's sometimes hard to find enough projects, enough work to allow people to get those credit hours. So we encourage people to get an early start on that. Also mentioned that the Fishing with the Fox tagged fishing project or contest starts this week. And so there'll be tagged fish in Mount Warner Reservoir, Moon Lake, and the Moose Pond. So if a person catches one of those tagged fish, they can bring it in and they can be entered in for a drawing for some really cool prizes later this year. There's a Facebook page for that if anybody's looking for more information. Law enforcement section's really been busy working some illegal bear baiting cases in the region. Of course, it's illegal to bait bears during the hound hunts, and so they're working those baits, legal baits right now, and trying to find out some of the causes or who's been doing those things. We'll have a new officer coming into the region 1st of June, around the 1st of June. His name was Ray Windsor, and he's replacing Brandon White, who transferred to a sergeant position in southern Utah. Good news, our AIS program is up and running well now. We've got a number of technicians on board and covering a lot of our ramps, especially at the Flame Gorge, to prevent any AIS species like quagga mussels from entering our waters here in the region. So that's good news. Our aquatics folks are busy with cutthroat work. They'll be starting to spawn Colorado River cutthroat over in Lake Canyon beginning next week. They'll be moving to the West Fork of Duchesne and eventually to Sheep Creek Lake in the upcoming weeks to complete those spawns. And those efforts are very crucial for being able to stock cutthroat into their native range throughout the region. So those are good efforts that are going on. Our aquatics crew is also busy out completing the spring gill netting surveys and other sampling efforts as well. I would mention with our wildlife section, our nuisance situation is starting to pick up. In the last week, we've had 2 cougar incidences and 2 bear incidents here in the region. None of those have been very serious, but these animals are starting to pop up around some of our private lands, and so that's something that we'll be working on. Hopefully it doesn't turn into a bad year for those kinds of things. Our winter range assessments have went really pretty well this year. Range is looking in pretty good shape this spring. That's to be expected after the good precipitation year that we had last year. But given our winter was relatively normal, I would say the losses on winter range for deer and elk is pretty minor this year. So hopefully we'll have a good year for deer and elk production and kind of help boost up some of our populations. I also mentioned that the Book Cliffs study with BYU is actually starting up now, and this is the second year of fawn and calf elk and deer captures. We're catching newborn fawns and calves, collaring those, and then ultimately determining what their survival rates and things are. So that started. We've already had a calf elk being born, and in the upcoming weeks we'll experience the peak of the fawning period out there in the Book Cliffs. So anyhow, a lot going on. Those are just a few things as we began to loosen COVID-19 restrictions. Our people are starting to get more and more busy out in the field and a lot of work going on. So I think that's all I have to share today, and I'll turn the time back over to you, Brett.
Thanks, Miles. Is there any other comments anybody wants to make, or any other updates, informational, that are not related to the agenda?
Hey, Brett, this is Dan. I just had a question for Miles on his update. Miles, my question is on that first thing you mentioned, I think, was the Book Cliffs action plan. You say that's in place now, it's been approved. How does that, so will the elk and deer management plans be updated? Will they tier to this new plan, or how will they interact? The new Book Cliffs action plan, how will that affect the deer and elk and other species management plans?
They're really kind of, I think the working group plan is to help direct the partners on what kind of efforts we're going to do collectively to try to improve range conditions, those types of things in the Book Cliffs. The unit plan, it may, when those are revised, there may be some things we'll consider with that. But really, they're kind of 2 separate plans that we're looking at. Really, like I say, it's really to help guide some of the recovery efforts and improvements that we want to have along the Book Cliffs. So I certainly they could maybe tier it a little bit, but they're also a little bit different.
Oh, okay. So it's really more habitat based, this new action plan.
Yeah, and like I say, it's not necessarily a DWR plan. It's a plan that's put together by the group collectively. So it's really something that addresses habitat, it mentions feral and stray type horses, those things included. So it's a number of efforts to try to improve conditions in the book list.
Okay. Hey, thanks for that clarification, Miles.
One other thing I'd mentioned, the flows on the Green River are expected to ramp up next week. And so that will impact some of the users below Flaming Gorge Dam, but those flows will be ramping up next week. So I thought we'd let people know that as well.
Just one more question, Miles. This is Dan again. What was the name of that, the new incoming CO that we're replacing Brandon White? I heard Ray Windsor, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
And he'll be stationed in the Book Cliffs area, primarily.
Okay. There's no other comments. We'll proceed with item number 5 on the agenda, which is Upland Game and Turkey Guidebook and Rule Recommendations. Heather's Talley is on with us. And if you don't mind, Heather, I'd like you to just, we've looked at your presentation online, but I'd like you to just take a moment and just kind of give a brief synopsis or a summary of what the changes, or however you want to present it. Just give us a brief update.
That sounds good. Thank you. So we do have a few different things that we're asking as far as a justification for changes with moving the youth quail hunt and the youth pheasant hunt both to the last weekend right before the general season starts. So that would be the last weekend in October. We want to extend that youth pheasant hunt through the following Thursday. And the reason for that is because we release pen-reared birds for those hunts, and they're generally not long-lived in the wild. So we just want to make sure that we're giving the youth all of the opportunity possible to be able to harvest those. And the reason for those movement of dates is just because the hunts are generally underutilized. So we're just trying to make sure that they see if that might make a difference as far as some of those, as far as participation goes. Also, the Wild Turkey Management Plan extension is due now for review for three-year extension, or we can otherwise it would need to be redone, revised right now. So because we don't see any significant changes that need to be made, and there are triggers in place to be able to assuage any issues that might come up, then that's why we're asking for that 3-year extension, and then we'll continue to work on a new plan. We would like to be able to have sage grouse translocations through any time for any time of the year that we can, incorporate broods and different ratios of males and females of the adults in those. So that way, sometimes we might wait until after the lekking season is over to be able to really tell where our populations stand before doing any translocations from our source sites. Also, for closing WMAs, for division-sponsored and co-sponsored events. This is to alleviate the issues with the public coming onto our events that are reserved for registrants. And a lot of these things have happened with youth pheasant hunts in the past that they've, we go out and release birds for them that SFW has purchased for these events, and then different members of the public come on and adults are shooting them before the kids get a chance to. So those are generally the closures that we've asked for, but because some of these events can pop up within the 3-year guidebook cycle, we would like to have the latitude and the support from the board in order to close those WMAs within that 3-year guidebook cycle, and that would be advertised online and in the guidebook. And some of our rule changes, we just have like some really simple tagging changes that we've made for clarifications. And then also the air guns for turkeys in the fall season only, and for rabbits and hares. So do you want me to, since this has come up at every RAC, would you like me to just read out of the RAC packet what the specifications would be for minimum requirements for the air guns?
Sounds good. Please do.
Okay. Excellent. Pre-charged pneumatic air rifle means a rifle that fires a single projectile with compressed air released from a chamber that's built into the rifle, pressurized at 2,000 to 3,000 psi from an external high compression device or source, such as a hand pump, compressor, or scuba tank. And the pre-charged pneumatic air rifle firing a single broadhead tipped bolt or arrow or pellet or slug during the fall turkey season that is a 22 caliber or larger, weighs 18 grains or more, and is fired at a velocity to produce at least 30 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. So we feel that with these minimum requirements, we can make sure that these are lethal. And again, they would only be approved for species that you're already allowed to harvest with a rifle, such as rabbits and hares, and turkeys in the fall season only.
Thank you. Miles, would you summarize the public comments on this topic, and then we will open it up to questions.
Sure. So we only had 2 respondents to the survey, and one of them opposed the proposal, the other one supported it. So I can give a quick update. The National Wild Turkey Federation, they opposed the proposal, and the reasons why is they opposed the use of air guns. I think in their comment it mentions that they didn't feel like it was demonstrated that air guns are effective on adult turkeys. They also expressed concern for the rimfire rifles for turkeys. They wanted that basically to be for youth only during the fall. And then they also opposed the new youth season dates. Those were their main comments. The other comment was submitted was from Pheasants Forever. And their main comment is they would like to see a trial hunt program on 5 areas for pheasants, in which a person would be able to buy a punch card and be able to harvest pheasants that were stocked in that area. So that's a little different than DWR has done in the past, where we do stock pheasants, but just a valid hunting licenses is all that's needed in that. So those are the 2 main comments. I think you all probably had an opportunity to read through those in detail, but that's a quick synopsis of what was commented on.
Okay, thank you. We'll open it up to questions, and maybe I'll just take the opportunity to start with one. Heather, by extending the youth pheasant hunt to the 5 days or whatever you extend to, you now have a discrepancy between the youth quail hunt and the youth pheasant hunt. Do you think that's going to cause some confusion when they potentially could be seeing both species during that time?
There is always a possibility of confusion with different season dates for different species, so that's a good question. The reason, again, why we wanted to allow for a longer period of time to harvest those pheasants is because if the youth go out there for just one weekend and they don't harvest all those pen-reared birds, they might still be alive for a few more days, but they're not going to last until the next hunting season. So we just want to make sure that they have ample opportunity to harvest those so that they're not wasted. But yeah, that would be up to the RAC and board if they feel that that would be a confusion.
And I'm not suggesting we shorten the pheasant hunt. I'm suggesting we lengthen the youth quail hunt to match. So when they're in the field, there's not the opportunity to have a violation if quail are hunted.
Right. There is that slight possibility of some impacts because right now it is just a 3-day season. And for quail, it is either sex and they are wild populations. They're not a put and take. So we wouldn't have those same concerns about them not living until the next hunt season. But that's a good question.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to questions from the RAC. Please state your name.
This is Dan Abeda. And Heather, my question for you is, I'm trying to better understand these air guns and the kind of the requirements with the air guns. I thought you mentioned these typically have a charge of or a capacity of 2,000 to 3,000 psi. Is that what you mentioned?
Sorry, on mute. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah. So my follow-up question to that is do you know what that equates to, like in feet per second? Because I'm more familiar with air guns and their rating in like feet per second? What are we talking? Do you have a kind of a conversion, or what these air guns that we're talking about? What's the feet per second rating on these?
So we didn't have a conversion like that listed in our rule. I can find that out for you though, and have it sent to the chair and have that disseminated to the RAC. So we can definitely do that, but they do have to be at least 30 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle.
Right, and that's another metric that I'm not familiar with for air guns, and maybe that's just because I'm not really into air guns, but I'm just trying to get a better understanding of these air guns, and I'm sure that you guys are probably you've used examples from other states where this is legal and probably followed those same requirements. Is that correct?
We have looked into all the other requirements of other states and have done research online to determine lethality. Yep, that's correct. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, if you would follow up with maybe, like I said, that question about feet per second, that would be helpful. Thank you. That's all I had.
Sure, thanks. Yep.
Any other questions from the RAC?
Yes, this is Joe Arnold. Again, on the air guns, just curious about why the air guns versus other means. I can see the crossbows and why they make sense for people that want to bow hunt, but what particular group are we going toward with an air gun versus a shotgun or an archery piece of equipment? I guess I just don't understand why air guns rather than.
We're having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
There's some feedback. Dan, would you mute your screen, please? Okay, now try it.
Okay. I'm just curious, just Joe Arnold, I'm just curious why air guns as far as a means of taking versus the other. What groups are we trying to? I understand archery, as far as crossbows and different forms of archery, but why air guns? What is the advantage of offering air guns versus a shotgun?
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, so the reason for the air guns is just to add another weapon type to the fall season. Try to keep in mind with the fall seasons that they are meant to reduce populations where there's a lot of human-turkey conflicts. So the whole reason behind that is just to, if somebody did have an air gun that they wanted to hunt with, that we would be able to offer more of that opportunity and just give them another means to be able to accomplish that goal of reducing those populations within the fall season where they are causing nuisance and depredation issues.
Okay. Currently 22s allowed rimfires, or is it only shotguns and archery currently?
Currently for the fall season, the rimfire 22s are allowed, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the RAC? Okay, if there are no other questions, sorry, is there one? Okay, if there are no other questions, I would entertain any discussion that you would have leading to a motion. If there is no discussion, I would entertain a motion.
This is Dan Abeda, and I would make a motion that we go ahead and accept the proposal here for upland game and turkey as it's been presented here to us.
Thank you. We had a couple people talking. Joe, why don't you go first?
I just wondered if we could have some clarification on the punch pass. I read the pheasants forever. It's pretty interesting. Lots of working work on other areas. Are we voting accepting proposals of the possible punch pass towards those WMAs? Is that what we're voting on now as well?
We're still having trouble with your audio, Joe.
Yeah, I think
you know what? Hey, Joe, I think I got it. If you want to go ahead and mute Joe, I think I got what you're getting at. And so you're asking us about the proposal that Pheasants Forever put in for the WMA pay-to-play situation. Is that true?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Just a way for us to maybe take care of the birds first, and we're spending money on them. There's some including costs, some of the solid dollars spent by obviously people buying passes, 25 punch cards, those things. Yes, exactly that.
Okay, I think I got most of that. I'm so sorry. You have a lot of feedback in your room. So what happened was we had already submitted our RAC packet, and we ended up talking with Pheasants Forever after that. And so they brought this proposal to us after the proposed changes had already gone out. And we have since then had a really good conversation with them about how some of this might be possible in the future, but we have a lot of logistics to work through. For example, some of the things with the prices of the punch passes and who would be administering those and actually policing who's doing the punch passes as far as our law enforcement and everything. And just we have to get our birds ordered a year in advance, so we'd have to work out some of those types of things because we'd have to have those set numbers for those different WMAs and then have all the logistics with the fiscally and with enforcement figured out. So it is something we're looking into, and we're interested in that, and we feel like they've got a really good idea, but it happened a little bit too quickly to come in for this round for us to figure out all the logistics.
Thank you. Did that answer your question, Joe?
Yes. I'm good. I think doesn't sound like vote on it.
Okay, so there's another issue there with sportsmen's groups are kicking in a significant percentage of the cost of the pheasants, and I'm sure that's part of the discussion. So where we're at is we have a motion to accept the item number 5 as presented in our RAC packet. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion. This is Rebecca Jones.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I will now do a roll call. Dana Beta.
Yes.
Okay, Joe Arnold.
Should I do sign language, or can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, I can read your lips. Big pass.
Yes.
Natasha Haddon.
Yes.
Rebecca Jones.
Yes.
Mike Smith.
Yes.
Jeff Taniguchi.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to item number 6, Migratory Upland Game Recommendations and Swan Rule Amendments. And I'll ask Blair to take a few moments and summarize this for us. Are you there, Blair? Are you Blair Stringham? Are you present? There you, okay, we can see you, Blair.
Can you hear me now? Okay, can you hear me all right now? Okay.
Yeah,
So
you're good.
Okay, so I'll be talking essentially about 5 species. That's mourning dove, white-winged dove, American crow, sandhill crane, and band-tailed pigeon. And we're only recommending one change to those species, and that's to one of our crane hunts in Box Elder County. We're asking to make that a longer season, so it'd be a 60-day hunt instead of a 9-day hunt, which it currently is. And that's partly because of the similar problems that you guys are experiencing out there in the Uinta Basin, with cranes just essentially staying for a longer period of time. And so that hunt would essentially allow people to hunt cranes for longer, keep them moving around, reduce depredation in some of our key areas where we're having a lot of damage right now. The other change I'd be talking about is a rule change to swan tagging, and that would allow people to actually retrieve their swan after they shoot it and return back to a better location, essentially, to tag their bird. We currently require them to tag it at the exact spot where they retrieve the birds, and generally that tends to be on a pond or somewhere like that. So we're just making a adjustment to allow people to move back to a dry spot or their boat or wherever they had shot the bird from, so they could put that tag on the bird. And those are essentially the only changes we're making with my recommendations.
Thank you. Miles, did we have any public comment on this item?
Just the 2 comments, and one of them supported the proposal, the other one was neutral, but no specific comments on this one.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to questions from the RAC.
Jeff Taniguchi, I have a question.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Are sandhill cranes a nuisance, or what are their numbers like? Are they pretty hardy? Is there good populations in Utah?
Yes, we have probably a couple thousand birds that actually we would consider resident birds that nest here, and then ultimately most of those go and migrate to New Mexico, where they spend the winter. They're part of a larger population called the Rocky Mountain population of cranes, which extends basically from Arizona all the way up through to about the Canadian border. And so there's probably about 25 to 30,000 cranes in that population, and we get a percentage of that population to hunt each year. And so that's what our tag numbers are based on. And we share essentially how many cranes can be harvested out of that population with about 7 or 8 other Western states. And so we only get a portion of the harvest, which is why the population being small, we aren't allowed to give out more permits than we currently do, because we'd essentially be over harvesting the population. But we do have some, I guess, challenges with them as well, to address your other part of your question. We do have some nuisance issues, but for the most part, they're just considered a game species, just like deer or geese or any other species like that. So.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe, Jeff, we had the same issue that was being proposed with the longer season here in the Uinta Basin. Blair, was it last year or the year before, when we didn't increase a lot of tag numbers, but we increased the season just to disrupt the crop damage that was being reported? Is that accurate?
Yep, that's correct. Pretty much the same issue, just a different part of the state.
Yeah, this is Dan Abeta. Blair, I've got a question for you on the swan tagging. Is that going to be pretty much just like up to, on a case-by-case situation, officer discretion in terms of the location of tagging a swan?
Yeah, so we tried to define it to some extent, and it will require some the officers essentially evaluating the situation. So if someone had shot a swan and returned all the way to their vehicle, that would probably violate that rule, because they did have an opportunity to tag that swan prior to returning to their vehicle. But what exactly that location is will have to be determined by the officer, whether it's their boat or whether they have to walk a couple hundred yards to get to a spot where they can set the bird down on dry land. So there will be some officer discretion there, but it is fairly clear that you can't, walk 3 miles and then tag your bird too. So.
Okay, thank you, Blair.
Blair, could I ask, the permit recommendations for swans, that's been consistent for many years, is that correct?
Yeah, so we've tried to have a pretty consistent message across the board with our bird permits. So for turkeys and a bunch of other species like that. Swans are a little bit different just because they get harvested over water a lot. And so the rule language needed to be adjusted a little bit from what we had for turkeys and cranes and a few other species like that.
And the permit numbers on swans are stable from prior years.
Yep. So the permits will be similar or the same number we had last year. That'd be 2,750.
And then just to educate the RAC, what's the rule on the trumpeter swans? When it hits a certain threshold, it affects the tundra swan hunt. Is that correct?
Yes, so we do have a quota of 20 trumpeter swans in the state. So each swan hunter is required to have their birds checked in at one of our regional offices or wherever migratory bird refuge, just to verify if it's a tundra swan or a trumpeter swan. And when we do it that quota of 20, the swan season is essentially shut down from that point forward if there are any days remaining in it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the RAC?
Yeah, I've got another question. This is Dan. Sorry. Band-tailed pigeons, Blair. Are they abundant in Utah, or are they kind of more of a rare, occurrence?
They're definitely more of a rare occurrence. Back in the 60s, we had really, really large populations of band-tailed pigeons down in the Four Corners area. And a lot of that was tied to grain production down there. And so we've seen over the last 50 years or so, there's been less and less grain produced in that part of the state. And as that happened, we've seen fewer and fewer band-tailed pigeons. They're still there, they're still abundant, but they tend to be in more natural habitats like oak brush and conifer trees, aspen stands, which just makes them a lot more difficult to see when they're not around, granary or somewhere like that where it's more open and you see them on power lines. So they're definitely in the state, but not as abundant as some like a Canada goose or a turkey.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, if there are none, I would entertain a motion.
This is Natasha Haddon. I'd like to pose a motion to accept the presentation as presented today by DWR, Blair Stringham.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
This is Rebecca Jones, and I'll second that motion.
Thank you. We'll now proceed to a roll call. Dana Beta.
Yes.
Joe Arnold.
Yes.
Dick Bess.
Yes.
Natasha Haddon.
Yes.
Rebecca Jones.
Yes.
Mike Smith.
Yes.
And Jeff Taniguchi.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to the item number 7, which is the AIS Rule Amendments. Bruce Johnson, would you take a moment and give us a brief summary?
Yes, thank you. This year, the state legislature enacted some statutes that we are going to follow with some administrative rules to back those up, and then some others that weren't necessarily associated with legislative changes. First off, the legislative changes were $20 non-resident fee that we'll now implement for non-resident boaters. Along with that, the non-resident boaters will be required to take the education course and then present those while boating. It also creates a new account for those fees that we'll be collecting. We will also be removing drain plugs across the state. Up till now, we've only had drain plug removal required for boats that were leaving Lake Powell. We want to be consistent on the state as well as with our surrounding states for that. It also asked for a feasibility study for an automated system for real-time data entry. And then administrative rules that were not associated with those are a 30-day dry time clarification for complex boats. We added a few definitions and then also prohibiting the alteration of the seals that we're attaching to those boats after inspection or decontamination. That follows up with an existing rule we have for altering the self-certification form. This just ties them together now.
Thank you. Miles, were there public comments on this item?
You know, the same two respondents just voted. One supported the proposal, the other was neutral, but no specific comments.
Thank you. Questions from the RAC?
Mr. Chair, this is Dan Abeda. I have a question for Bruce on this. My question, Bruce, is the $20 non-resident fee. How does the division plan to use that funding?
That'll go to our interdiction efforts for our seasonal employees, our equipment, inspection stations that we're trying to set up at different locations in the state.
Like 100% then?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the RAC or comments prior to proceeding to a motion? Okay, if there are none, I will entertain a motion on the AIS Rule Amendments, item 7.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Dan Abeda again. I will make a motion that we accept the AIS rule changes as presented here this evening.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Jeff Taniguchi, I second.
Thank you. I will now proceed to roll call. Dan Abeda,
Yes.
Joe Arnold,
Yes.
Dick Bess,
Yes.
Natasha Haddon,
Yes.
Rebecca Jones,
Yes.
Mike Smith,
Yes.
and Jeff Taniguchi.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. We'll now proceed to the final item on our agenda, which is the walk-in access rule amendments. Bryan Christensen, would you take a moment to summarize this, please?
Sure thing. So basically what we're doing with walk-in access is going through the rule and through our program and making some simplifications. We're trying to just make the whole thing easier for the sportsmen and for the landowners and really for the division to administer. We make some clarifications. We take out some old methods of gathering data and signing up for the program and applications and things like that, and really moving more towards some standardized practices with running this type of program. And so that's kind of the short nutshell version of it. There's no real major changes as far as the program itself goes. There's some small changes that like one of them is removing the wooden registration boxes from each of the walk-in access areas. That's a new change, but any of the things we've put in there, we feel like we can find better ways of getting the information we need, or working with our landowners and our public.
Thank you. The process would still be you'd need the permit and take the test, right, to hunt the walk-in areas.
Right. We haven't changed that at all as far as the walk-in access authorization. Anyone that goes onto one of those properties to hunt or fish would still have to get an annual authorization. The one thing we did change about that is that it's good for a 365-day period instead of December to or January to December each year. So it's more consistent with our other license types that you'd buy.
Okay, thank you. Miles, would you address public comments on this item?
Yeah, sure. It's the same thing on this one. We had just the two original respondents. One of them supported the proposal, the other was neutral on this proposal.
Thank you. Questions from the RAC?
This is Natasha Haddon. I was just wondering if some of the walk-in access areas could also extend to maybe wildlife watching, where they could take the same manner for the hunting and fishing and trapping, have to take the online course and, I don't know, purchase a permit or something like that, if the private landowner was amenable to that.
Yeah, that's something that has come up in our process this time around. The activities that happen on walk-in access properties really are dictated by the funding source. The hunting properties that we have are actually paid almost entirely by a federal grant that stipulates that money is to be used for walk-in access purposes for hunting and fish or hunting and trapping. Any other activity outside of that, like hiking or mountain biking or camping, we don't have the authorization to give as part of a walk-in access. Now, the landowner may choose to do that. They may say, I'm a walk-in access property and I'm totally fine with, you know, these different activities like wildlife watching or camping or other things. They would have to do that independently from us as a division. If it's hunting walk-in access, that's the only thing we're allowed to authorize the public to go do there. And this rule actually helps clarify that that's the case.
Is it just a payment issue, or why can't we offer non-consumptive types of activities as the DWR? We have them programs.
Right, and I see the benefit in doing that, and many of our walk-in access properties haven't had any issues with those types of activities. We just don't have the authorization to tell the public they can go there and do it on the properties that are funded by that federal grant. It's very specific what hunting means in that grant, and those non-consumptive options are not considered hunting per se. Now, if the division uses different sources to pay for those walk-in access leases, or we created different types of walk-in access specifically for bird watching or something else like that, then we would need to use a different funding source, and that could happen. We just haven't really explored that as an option as of yet, but it certainly could happen under a different funding source.
Thank you, and maybe it wouldn't even need to be funded. You know, maybe non-consumptive would be something that a portion of these landowners would welcome, just to let people enjoy the bird watching or whatever it may be, hiking on their property. I guess we don't know.
Yeah, it's something we haven't really explored, and bird watching and those other kinds of wildlife watching are very popular. So perhaps there is some opportunity there. We may explore that, but probably call it something different than walk-in access, so it didn't get confused by the consumptive side. Maybe there's another way to treat that. So I like the idea, though.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the RAC?
Jeff Taniguchi with a question. I just want to know about compliance. Is there any data that you can share with how many people are in compliance and really registering and accessing these properties? And the second part of my question is there more walk-in access in the Uinta Basin or statewide that is growing, or is it pretty well staying at a certain level?
Okay. Help me remember both questions if I miss one. The compliance was the first question.
Right.
This is part of our rule revamp. The method that we've had in the past was for a public user to go to a walk-in access property and sign in at a paper registration with a wooden box at an access point. We aren't confident that that's happening all the time. There are some that are very good about doing it, and there are some properties that seem to have a good track record. But there are many that we go and the papers have been blank for months, if not a couple of years. Others, we go to the boxes and it's got people that just visited the property but actually weren't hunting or fishing. So we're not very confident in the paper registration box system as it is now. And so we're looking at doing some different methods, some more updated methods. I don't know if you're familiar with how the HIP program works with migratory hunting.
Right.
Before you can get your HIP number, you've got to go on and answer a few questions about your previous year hunting. There are methods like that I think we could try moving towards and get a lot better data about which properties are being used, if people are satisfied with what's being there, how often they're being used, and get some really usable stuff rather than these paper boxes that fill up with bees and hornets and stuff during the year. So I can't say that we have a really good set of data now as far as usership, but that is the goal with this recommendation in mind. And then I think your second, if that satisfies that question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Second one was on just, are we growing with walk-in access? Is there any new places in the Uinta Basin that have been acquired, or statewide? What are the numbers looking at?
Sure. We've got some new coordinators throughout the state that are running walk-in access, and I'm really excited about that. Not only are they new to it, many of them new to it, but they're very energetic and really good at what they're doing. So we haven't tried to grow walk-in access areas statewide quite yet. For now, what we've been doing is going through each property that's been enrolled, and we're going to revisit each of those, make sure it's the quality that we feel like we should have in this program, make sure the maps are accurate, and really there's a good opportunity for people on these properties. So that's been our main goal. There has been some growth and not much in the Northeastern region. We are looking at that. Wes is actively looking around and taking opportunities where there is interest. So we can grow a little bit, but for now, our main focus, like I say, has been to make sure what we have is good first, and then and if there are properties that are not as valuable as maybe they were 10, 15 years ago, we would redirect that money towards properties that are more beneficial.
So are they surveyed often for the quality?
They are now. We've surveyed basically when an enrollment would end. So if it was a 5-year contract with the landowner, we would go look at it basically when they'd renew. But part of this rule recommendation is to go every year, if not more than that. We want to visit these properties frequently, especially fishing properties with ponds where water can be drawn down easily in a drought year. We want to make sure that those kinds of things are looked at here and there, and we want to hear from our public users too, and see what kind of experiences they're having. But yeah, we'll definitely be monitoring each property with much more frequency than they probably ever have.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the RAC?
Yeah, this is Dan again, Dan Abeda. Brian, I don't really, I'm just trying to understand the program. So the property owner is monetarily compensated based on usage, or how does that work?
In Utah, the way we have it set up is that we have blocks of acreage. If we just talk hunting for a moment, there's blocks of acreage. If you have a certain amount, then there's a 1 year to a 5 year allotment as far as their payment can go. And it's actually online where we publish that information. And so we just look at how much acreage they have. A biologist goes out and reviews the property and looks at how usable it is, what habitat conditions are, and then we just look at that table grid on our website, and then that's what the landowner gets paid for a hunting area. A fishing area is a little different. We measure that for streams by quarter to half mile increments. Ponds and lakes, reservoirs, those are done by flat water acreage.
I see. So it is based on, if I heard you correctly, it's based on the size.
Yeah, at the moment, the current rule really just looks at the size acreage.
Okay.
The rule is, as I'm proposing it, gives us a little bit more flexibility with how we rate a property and how they're paid. We haven't changed our payment table at this point, but the new rule would not only consider its size, but the quality, how much opportunity there is to harvest different species, the length of the agreement, if it's a 1 year thing or a 5 year thing. So there are multiple factors now within this rule change that give us a little bit more discussion power, basically, with the landowner to decide, is it really worth the same amount as another property that has more opportunity that's the same size, or do we just pay them all the same way? So I kind of hope we can move forward with that and refine the way we pay these out. And also, in some ways, it actually will be a benefit to a landowner that has more opportunity and more quality to receive a little bit higher payment.
Do you see usage ever factoring into that payment?
I think eventually, yes. There are states that actually only pay for, like, big game hunting. They only pay by per user, and so the way they run their systems is you or I, we would have to go online and print off a little certificate thing, and then when we got to a property, we'd fill it out and drop it in an Iron Ranger, one of those metal pipes, and then the division would go and collect those and see how many people actually showed up to hunt there, and they'd pay based off of that type of usage method. It's a little challenging given staffing and time and things like that to run a program like that, and it may be beneficial in the future just to look at usage, but we're also not we're not talking about a whole lot of money per area either. If it was tens of thousands of dollars per year, it would be easier to be more picky about how it's paid. But we give it's a nice compensation, but the landowners are not making money off of this. It's more an opportunistic type program where they believe that they want to share their land and make it available instead of making profit. It's got a lot of heart to it, really.
Yeah. I just pulled up the table and looked at the the different I guess ranges of acres and what it pays out based on how many years, et cetera. I see what you're saying. I mean, I think it looks like the maximums, in this table I'm looking at online is like 2,200. That's for a 5 year contract with 5,000 plus acres. So it's, it's not a lot of money.
Nope, it's really not. It's been sufficient for a lot of landowners to participate, and they're grateful for what we can do. It's a small program, and it's funded, in part by the division and then by that federal grant. So there's not a whole lot of money behind it, but we are grateful for the landowners that participate and are willing to be part of this and share their land with the public. We think it's pretty cool.
What year did this start out?
I was hoping somebody wouldn't ask me that. I've been in this position for just under a year, and I haven't found that answer yet. I know it's been more than 10 years. I can give you that much.
2007.
2007. Okay.
Thank you.
That's what, like 13? I think that's 13 years. Is that right? Did I do my math okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I know the answer.
Jeff Taniguchi with another short question. I know this kind of pertains to statewide, but as stream access has been won in court cases, do you see more landowners allowing access now that their lands are able to be fished by the public anyway? And if a landowner comes to you, even though they start an agreement, they still kind of share in that whole compensation business. I'm just saying that has there been any significant landowners participate with the stream access laws being changed?
I can answer it in two ways, I think. Since I've been in this position, I've not seen any change at all with participation of landowners in any of the stream access law changes or appeals. So within a year, I haven't seen anything. I don't see a lot through the notes from my predecessors either that the stream access laws have changed our participation in this program. Where I think we see the most up and down changes where landowners are participating or they're not is actually through the sale of their land. You know, it sometimes goes to family members. You know, dad will sell it to their kids. The kids have different about how they want to use the land or the waters. That tends to be the biggest factor with whether somebody continues to be part of the walk-in access program or not.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, I might open it to comments, and maybe I'll start one. When I think it's acceptable when you make this motion, Natasha, that you could recommend this motion could be made to accept as presented with the recommendation that the DWR look further into non-consumptive uses if that was desired. And I personally think that would, it may not put it right on you, Bryan, but at least it'll get it in the minutes and get it in writing that we think that'll be a positive step. So that's just a comment I have. I can't make motions, so that's what I have to say. Is there any other comments? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I don't have any objection to that, Brett, not at all.
Thank you. Okay, I will entertain a motion.
Okay, this is Natasha Haddon, and I'll make a motion to accept the presentation as presented today, with also looking deeper into looking at non-consumptive uses of walk-in access areas.
Thank you. We have a motion.
This is Rebecca Jones, and I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Roll call. Dan Abeda.
Yes.
Joe Arnold.
Can you hear me okay? We turn
Yes.
our mic.
Yes.
So will this affect, before I vote on it with the non-consumptives, would it affect the amount of huntable acres if we tried to lump them all together?
I don't believe it's that specific. I believe clarify me if I'm mistaken, Natasha, just recommending that the DWR look at potential for non-consumptive uses. Is that what I heard, Natasha?
Yeah, correct. Accepting the proposal as presented, but looking further into options for non-consumptive uses as well for the future.
That answer your
Joe,
question?
I don't think we would see that incorporation as any type of reduction for the hunting side of the walk-in access. I think they could be treated at the same time without any loss of opportunity there.
Okay, you just mentioned grant money that was specific for hunting. So if the money came away, then acres could possibly come away in order to access more non-consumptive. So I would be concerned about that if that was the case. I can approve it. Yes, I can approve it, or yes on the way it was presented. I guess it'll be talked about later, right?
Okay, thank you. Dick, Bess,
Yes.
Natasha, Haddon,
Yes.
Rebecca Jones,
Yes.
Mike Smith,
Yes.
Jeff Taniguchi.
Yes.
Okay, there was one other item which was just informational, and I don't know if anyone looked at it. It was quite interesting, and if you haven't looked at it, I'd suggest you do. With the Willard Spur, Ashley, I can't say the last name, but Ashley did a good job on that presentation. It was quite informative. Miles, is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we adjourn this meeting?
No, I don't think so. Again, just appreciate everybody's participation on the RAC meeting tonight. I know this format's a little tricky at times, but it's actually works pretty well for us, I think. So again, thank you to all the RAC members for taking some time out of your evening to participate in the process with us.
I'd like to echo what Miles said. Thank you, everyone. We do have to have a motion and a second and a roll call to adjourn, though. Officially, I know you could shut off your computer, but that doesn't count.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
I second that. Dick Bess.
Joe Arnold.
Joe Arnold and Dick Bess made the motion and second. Dana Beta.
C.
Is that a yes?
That was a yes in Spanish.
Joe Arnold,
Yes.
Dick Bess,
Yes.
Natasha Haddon,
Yes.
Rebecca Jones,
Yes.
Mike Smith,
Yes.
and Jeff Taniguchi.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. This meeting is now adjourned.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. You guys did a great job.